Hello everyone, Zero Eclipse here after a good long break. As you all probably very well aware, I've been kind of busy with my job and such. With me here today is my good friend Junto Ryusuke. Say hi.
Hey guys.
He's going to be here in the background. Now, for those of you who are wondering where I've been focusing on various different projects in the background. Right now, Legends of Lavros, an original story idea that I came up with, has gotten quite a bit of recognition. So I've been trying to focus on creating the game so we can start working on the vocal cast. So for right now, here's Chapter 6, Job Hunt and Settling In. Feeling the warmth of the sun's beams hit my face made me wake up from my peaceful slumber. I slowly opened my eyes and lifted myself up from the couch. I yawned and stretched my arms, feeling the relieved end sounds of my back popping. I took the bedsheet off and stood up, grabbed my shirt and jacket and put them on. I realize I don't have any other clothing with me. I'll have to talk to Twilight and see if there's a pony in town who makes clothing. Not only that, if I'm going to be staying here, I'm also going to need a job, since I'm flat broke. I put my shoes on and walked into the kitchen so I can grab some breakfast before starting my day. I then saw Twilight sitting at the table, reading a book, while Spike was at the stove, seeming to be cooking up something. "Good morning, guys," I greeted. Spike and Twilight looked up at me and smiled. "Good morning, Daniel. Did you sleep well?" Twilight asked. I nodded while smiling. "I sure did." Walked over to the table and sat down. "So what's your plan today?" Twilight asked. "Well, I kinda need to find a shop that sells clothing. Main reason is because I only have this pair for right now." I started to look at my clothing. "Do you perhaps know any pony in town that sells clothing?" Twilight smiled at that. "Rarity is the best cloth maker in Ponyville. You can head over to her bouquet later on. She'll take your measurements for your clothing," Twilight explained. "She makes clothing by scratch? That's amazing," I said, impressed by her skills. "She's also the most beautiful pony in the world," Spike swooned, while I saw hearts in his eyes. "What?" I looked at Twilight and whispered, "What's up with Spike?" "Oh, he has a crush on Rarity," Twilight whispered back. "Oh, I see," I replied. "I guess it would make sense why he gave me the stink eye yesterday when I gave that compliment to Rarity about her taste in fashion. Does Rarity know about this?" I asked. "She does, but she doesn't want to hurt his feelings," Twilight answered. "Guess that would make sense. Falling in love with some pony at a young age is normal. It happens a lot back in my world as well." "Breakfast is ready," Spike announced, putting a plate of pancakes on the table, with syrup and butter. "Man, I never had pancakes in quite a while," I said, taking a few. "Well, you'd be surprised on how amazing Spike's cooking is," Twilight said, smiling. "Ah, come on, Twilight, you're making me blush," Spike said, blushing with embarrassment. I chuckled and took a forkful of pancakes, and holy hell! These are the best pancakes I've ever had! What is it that these ponies use that make their food taste so good? I never want to eat the food on Earth ever again. "These are amazing, Spike," I said, smiling, taking another bite of his amazing pancakes. "Glad you like them," Spike added, taking a bite of his own. We all ate silently for a bit until I spoke again. "Hey, Twilight, do you know any pony who's hiring for the moment? I kinda need a job so I can earn some money," I explained. Twilight swallowed her food and placed her fingers on her chin and thought. I think Applejack and Pinkie Pie might be hiring right now. You know where Sugar Cube Corner is? Applejack works over at Sweet Apple Acres, which is a farm at the edge of Ponyville," she suggested. "Pardon me, I didn't do a read over, so I will stump like you know the usual. I'm not a professional." Sweet Apple Acres and Sugar Cube Corner. Those places can be a good place to start. "Thanks, Twilight." She nodded, and we finished eating. After I finished, I got up from the table and placed my dishes in the sink. I walked back into the living room and grabbed my bag and sword, which then ended with me at the door. As I opened it, I'll be back in a few hours, guys, called out. Oh, hold on, Daniel, Twilight called out. She ran into the living room with a piece of paper in her hands and gave it to me. This paper has our numbers. Call us if you need anything. I nodded and took it. Thanks. See you in a bit. I waved goodbye and left the library. I took out my iPhone and punched in Twilight's and Spike's numbers on the paper. I added the names to each of their numbers so that I knew who was who. I walked down the streets of Ponyville, receiving a few hellos and waves from the ponies. It really made me happy to see these amazing creatures warm up to me and show me so much happiness. Earth could really learn a thing or two from Equestria, that's for sure. Getting bored from walking down the dirt path, I decided to listen to some music of my own during my walk to Sugar Cube Corner. I pulled out my iPhone, placed on my earbuds, and played the music. The blast of the music brought my energy up, and I started walking faster to the shop until I finally reached my first destination, Sugar Cube Corner. I pushed open the door and heard the sound of a little bell go off. I then lowered the volume of the music and took an earbud out. Welcome to Sugar Cube Corner, a female voice greeted. I looked at the counter and saw a mare who had blue fur, pink and white swirled hair that looked oddly like ice cream. Huh? She was wearing a white apron, wearing pink orb earrings, and had pink eyes. Man, this mare loves pink, just like Pinky does. I smiled and walked over to her. Thank you. My name is Daniel Blaze, ma'am, I agreed, holding my hand out. She smiled and shook my hand. So you're the human I heard about. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is mrs.Cake, she greeted. A fitting name for you since you're working in an amazing place like this, I commented. Thank you, dear. Now, is there anything I can do for you? She asked. Actually, there is. I was wondering if you're hiring for the moment, since I kinda don't have a job, I explained. She smiled and nodded. I see. Do you have experience working in a kitchen and know how to bake pastries? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I replied, nodding my head. All right then, let me see how well you are when it comes to baking sweets. Please, come into the kitchen, she said, waving her hand to make me follow. I was a little surprised that she wants to see what I'm capable of with baking. Well, might as well. If this is the only way to get a job. I took my other earbud out, placed my iPhone back into my bag, and walked into the kitchen with her. Bake me something you know, and we'll go from there, she said. I nodded, placed my bag, sword, and everything else down. Washed my hands before I started. I went to the fridge and took out some eggs, butter, and milk, which then led me to the pantry. While there, I took out some flour, vanilla, sugar, and other ingredients. I started pouring some of the ingredients together, the flour, eggs, sugar, vanilla, and so forth, and mixed them all in. I'm going to blow her away with this special recipe I picked up from Earth. After the batter was finished, I placed it into a baking sheet and placed it in the oven. I then started on the next step. I made a thin sheet of dough and watered it down a little, probably what I was saying. Watered it down a little. After around surprisingly 5 minutes, the sponge cake in the oven was done. Maybe they used magic, or the machinery in this oven makes baking faster. Anyway, I allowed the cake to cool off for a minute until I took it off the baking sheet and placed the sponge cake in the mixing bowl. Mrs. Cake was eyeing me with interest at what I was doing. I could tell that she was asking herself, what kind of pastry is he making? I placed more sugar, a few other ingredients in the mixing bowl, and started mixing until a soft, gripping dough formed. I washed my hands again before I started grabbing handfuls of the cake like dough. After a few good hand scoops and after placing it on the dough, I placed the cake in the oven again and waited. This is really an interesting recipe you're making, Daniel. I've never seen anybody make something like this before, Mrs. Cake said. I smiled and chuckled softly. Just wait until you try it. You'll die to have more of this special cake I'm making. Daddy! I turned and saw Pinkie Pie smiling at me with a huge smile. What are you doing here? I'm here to see if I can get a job here. I'm baking a special cake, and it's almost done. It's a recipe I recently made back on Earth, I explained. Why didn't you tell me about this? I could have been here, Pinkie said. I simply chuckled. Well, you win some, you lose some. With a ding, the cake was done. I took some oven mitts, put them on, and pulled the cake out. Ooh, it smells good, Pinkie chirped. Thanks, but there's one last ingredient to add, I said. What would that be? Pinky asked. I smiled and answered, powdered sugar. A lot. I grabbed the bag of powdered sugar and poured some of it on the cake. And done. Ladies, this special pastry is called the crumb cake, I announced, holding the cake out. It looks really good, not to mention mouth-watering, Pinky said, drooling a little. I chuckled and placed it on the counter. I then grabbed a knife and cut the crumb cake into small squares. I placed a square on a plate, each on both one of Miss Cake's and Pinky's plates, and took one for myself. Take a bite while it's still hot, I said. Pinky took the crumb cake and immediately took the whole thing in her mouth. How did she do that? Better not to ask. I lifted my own and took a bit of a bit? I think it means bite. I lifted my own and took a bite as well. Whoa, this did taste a lot better than the ones I made back home. The cake was bursting with flavor and was melting in my mouth, along with the powdered sugar mixing well. I looked up and saw Mrs. Cake and Pinkie Pie with shocked faces. You two okay? I asked. Okay? Pinkie asked and then burst into a huge smile. This is the best thing I've ever had! I laughed, glad that she enjoyed the crumb cake. This is fantastic, dear, Mrs. Cake said, taking another bite of her slice. I never knew you'd be so gifted with baking goods and sweets. I smiled and blushed a little. Well, my mother taught me a long time ago and still has the recipe. Well, your mother taught you well, she said, smiling warmly at me. We need to introduce this pastry to the bakery, Mrs. Cake, Pinkie said suddenly. Well, this is Daniel's recipe, so it's up to him to decide, Mrs. Cake said. I smiled and nodded. I'd be more than happy to give you the crumb cake recipe, Mrs. Cake. I reached into my pocket and took out a piece of paper and a pen. Scribbled down the recipe and the instructions as I handed the paper to her. Here you are. Mrs. Cake smiled and took it. Thank you, Daniel. Let me give you something for your trouble. She then left the kitchen and left me and Pinkie for a second. You'll have to tell me the other recipes you know. Your crumb cake is so good, Pinkie said. I chuckled. We'll see if I can get a job here, that is, I explained. Mrs. Cake came back into the kitchen with a brown sack and gave it to me. Take this, please. I took the brown sack and opened it. I was shocked by what I saw. Inside the bag were small gold coins. These must be the currency this world uses. Are you sure you want to give me this? I asked, hoping this was a mistake. I want you to take these bits. A little thank you for sharing your recipe on your delicious crumb cake, and for the recipe, she explained. I looked back into the sack, then back at her. You sure? I asked before taking it. I'm sure, she answered. I smiled and closed the sack. Thank you, Mrs. Cake. Also, does this mean I get the job? We'll see. I need to see if we can have you available on some of the days. I'll let Pinkie know and she'll tell you. You have her number, right? Mrs. Cake asked. I nodded. Yep. Twilight gave me her number this morning, I said. She smiled and nodded. All right then. Thank you for coming by, Daniel, and we hope you can work here for us. I smiled and nodded back. Thank you, Mrs. Cake. I'll see you later. Bye, Pinkie. I waved goodbye as I left Sugar Cube Corner. Bye, Daddy! Pinkie shouted while waving goodbye. I smiled and rolled my eyes, pulled out my iPhone again, and listened to some music during my walk again. Twilight mentioned Applejack worked on a farm at the edge of Ponyville, so a large red farm shouldn't be too hard to spot.